Welcome to the 70mm focal length for the SLR Lounge Canon Lens Wars series. We have a total of 7 lenses in this grouping, and all of them are zoom lenses, so in this video we're going to go ahead and take a look to see which is our favorite. For those that are new to the SLR Lounge Canon Lens Wars series, be sure to check out the actual teaser introduction video where we kind of show you the entire series. We show you our testing methodology as well as what we're looking for, and check out all the other videos and articles on each focal length as well. Okay, so we have 7 zoom lenses here that cross over the 70mm focal length. So let's go ahead and go over the lineup of our lenses. Now first over here we have the 24-70 f4. We have its big brother, the 24-70 f2.8 Mark II. We have the 24-105 f4. We have the 70-200 f4. We have the 7200 f2.8, and this is the non-IS version. And then we have the 7200 f2.8 Mark II with IS. And then we have the 28-300. All right, that was a mouthful. Now, once again, this is a visual test of differences and not a technical one. So we're trying to distinguish differences in appearance while viewing the images simply full screen on a 27-inch 3K resolution display. Now, we'd usually talk about their overall sharpness, then we go over the aesthetic quality, we go over all this over each of the different lenses, but this time we're gonna approach things a little bit differently. And this is mainly because of the fact that most of these images, they looked virtually identical when we simply viewed them at full screen. So that's right, folks. When shooting each of these lenses at their wide open apertures or their WOAs, all the lenses are quite solid in the lineup, and overall they're very similar in looks. That being said, while viewing the images blind without any information on which lens was used, I was slightly preferring certain images over others. Once again, the 24-70 f2.8 Mark II seemed to stand out a bit overall. It appeared a bit more sharp, a bit more crisp. It also had slightly more bokeh and more pleasing bokeh than the other lenses. Another favorite of mine was the 7200 f2.8 Mark II, as well as the 7200 standard, this one with image stabilization, this one without. Both these lenses had a nice amount of bokeh. They were very sharp, very crisp as well. And undoubtedly, the reason that these 3 kind of stood out is most likely because they were the only 3 lenses in the grouping that could step down to f2.8 instead of basically f4 or f5 of that of the 28-300. But that being said, even when comparing all the lenses at their WOAs, their widest open apertures, some at f2.8, most at f4, and even one at f5, they were quite similar aesthetically. However, if you're looking for the maximum amount of bokalicious bokeh in this pack, then I would look to 3 lenses. And the one at the top of my list would be the 7200 f2.8 Mark II, then the 7200 f2.8 non-IS. These 2 have the most and the best quality to the overall look in the bokeh. Now, this can be most clearly seen when comparing the area to the left of the model between each photo. In very close 3rd and 4th place, we have the 24-70 Mark II as well as the 7200 f4. Now, between the last 3, the looks are really quite similar, although I'd probably say in 5th place is the 24-105. I know, our redheaded stepchild is actually not in last place at the 70mm focal length. Then after that would be the 24-70 f4, and then finally the 28-300. Of the last 2 lenses, I would say that they were a bit weak on the power of their bokeh. And that sounds like a superpower. Maybe it should be. All right, so they're pretty similar when viewed full screen. Why don't we take a closer look for sharpness and see exactly which lenses were ahead of the pack when shooting at their WOAs or their widest open apertures. Now, most of the lenses were pretty solid in terms of sharpness. However, there are some at the lower end of the pack, and there were a few that were ahead of the pack. And by far the 2 worst in terms of sharpness were our redheaded stepchild, the 24-105 f4 and the 28-300 f3.5-5.6. Granted, of course, that even though they were at the bottom end of the sharpness scale among this grouping, they're still pretty solid, and you can't say that they're not sharp lenses. It's just when we compare them to the others, they're not quite as sharp. In the middle of the pack, we have the 24-70 f2.8 Mark II, this guy right here. We have the 24-70 f4. Again, both were excellent in terms of sharpness, but slightly ahead of the pack were our 7200s. So mainly the 7200 f2.8 IS, and then the 7200 f2.8 non-IS, and the 7200 f4 even were a bit more crisp and sharp than the rest in the group. But if I had to choose one in this grouping for overall sharpness and clarity that I would say was simply the best when shot wide open, I would say it's the 7200 f2.8L IS Mark II. All right, so let's flip them all up to their widest common aperture, their WCA of 5.6, and let's see which lenses are sharpest from edge to edge. Now, once again, they're all pretty solid, but the 7200s, they appear to edge out the other lenses in terms of sharpness. In particular, the 2 best are the 7200 Mark II and the standard 7200 without image stabilization. When it came to other areas like, say, barrel distortion, then you would expect that the wide-angle zoom lenses are going to have a bit more barrel distortion than, say, the telephoto lenses at the 70mm focal length. And that was true. They did have a bit, although visually it was difficult to tell. Now, for overall contrast and color, visually they all performed quite well, with the exception of the 28-300, which appeared to be ever so slightly less contrasty than the other lenses. But overall, again, all of them were pretty solid. All right, so what is the conclusion in this grouping of lenses? Well, I have three solid favorites, and we're gonna start from the top with our favorite zoom lens, and that's once again the most obvious, the 24-70 f2.8 Mark II. And once again, at every zoom length, from 24 all the way to 70, we've seen this outperform every zoom and even perform very close and similarly to, say, prime lenses. It's a beautiful lens, and given the fact that it's so versatile in going from a wide angle to a semi-tight zoom, this is really the first lens that I would upgrade to, and it's really quite a bargain for what you're getting, despite the fact that it costs over $2,000. I know it's $2,300 and I don't know how you could say it's a bargain, but when you see the image quality, you'll realize that it is a bargain. Now, personally, I'd skip over the 24-105 and the 24-70 f4 unless you simply need image stabilization, say for DSLR video. And in that case, if you do need stabilization, the 24-70 f4 is the better bet in terms of image quality. Before, we talked about the 20-300, and while it does offer a ton of flexibility in its focal range, it also provides sort of middle of the road good results at every focal length, but not great results at really anything. So again, for best overall quality, I wouldn't necessarily recommend this lens unless you just simply need the most convenient one lens setup that can do almost anything. In the telephoto range, my clear favorite and the second lens that I would wholeheartedly recommend is the 7200 f2.8L Mark II. Now, like the 24-70 f2.8 Mark II, this is a new take on a classic lens that simply outperforms most telephoto lenses in its class. Again, around $2,500, it's not necessarily a cheap or inexpensive lens, but it is a best-in-class type lens, and it's a great value for the image quality and what you're getting out of it. If you want to save money though, yet have the same type of image quality or at least close to it, you can save around $1,000 by going with a 7200 2.8 without image stabilization. The image quality is going to be almost identical, you just simply aren't going to have image stabilization. Personally, I would again skip over the f4 version of the 7200, simply because at telephoto focal lengths, the additional stop of f2.8 is very crucial in low light situations to get that extra speed out of your shutter speed. Once again, also we want f2.8 because we get a more shallow depth of field mixed in with that compression creates a beautiful look to your images. So to wrap it up, my two favorite lenses based on the overall aesthetic quality of the bokeh, the amount of bokeh, the image sharpness quality, and so forth are going to be the 24-70 f2.8 Mark II, which should be no surprise, and the 7200 f2.8 Mark II as well. Now, for those of you I mentioned before in other videos several times that if you're going to have two or more lenses, then the first two lenses I would get is the 24-70 and then the 7200. Then you can add on specialty lenses and others as you need over time. I hope you all enjoyed the 70mm focal length in the SLR Lounge Canon Lens Wars series. Now be sure to check out the actual article on slrlounge.com by clicking in the description below this video for example images, for more information on each of these lenses, as well as for links on where to purchase. My name is Pye, and I'll see you all in the next episode.